Welcome to Renegade Thinkers Unite, a show that will help you transform your marketing from mere messaging to programs that break the rules and make a difference. Join the movement today and learn non-traditional techniques that give you an edge. Now, here's your Chief Marketing Renegade, Drew Neisser.
Okay, Renegade Thinkers, let's get united around one kernel of truth. Never confuse or equate tactics with strategy. Even the coolest new tactic like virtual or augmented reality can't overcome a flawed strategic approach. But when you bring a smart strategy together with a whiz-bang technology, magic can happen. And that, my friends, is why I'm so excited to be with you this special episode of Renegade Thinkers Unite, during which I'll be talking to the folks behind a brand smacking new virtual reality training experience for aspiring KFC chefs. First up is Jorge Felix, KFC's Director of Advertising. Fans of Alan Hart's Marketing Today podcast, which I am, will have heard George talk about KFC's 2016 Effie award-winning campaign. And in that episode, it's actually 57, and Alan is not paying me, but he should. George noted that all of KFC's advertising is designed to both enhance the brand and drive sales. And that the key to that strategy was putting the kernel right smack into the center of the brand, using a term I love, kernelizing. So, George, here we are talking about virtual reality, gaming, training, and cooking chicken. 4 things that I suspect have not been used in the same sentence before. What is the strategy behind this effort?
Well, it's definitely an interesting endeavor for us. Really it starts with the fact that we have cooks in every one of our restaurants that are hand preparing the Colonel's original recipe chicken. And so that means that we have about 19,000 cooks across the country that go through extensive training. We call it chicken mastery certification in order to make Kentucky Fried Chicken. And so there's nothing that's changing about that. There's no replacement for getting your hands dirty and making chicken in the restaurant. But we really saw an opportunity, by like you said, kernelizing the brand. The best person to teach someone to make original recipe would be Colonel Sanders himself. And so through the magic of, virtual reality technology, we've been able to bring the kernel back in a fun and engaging way that we think can supplement our training and really bring a sense of pride and excitement to the team members that, honestly, when you compare us to other quick serve restaurants, it's a point of difference that we have cooks in every kitchen that are hand preparing meals. And so we want our team members to feel that pride and excitement.
And how much of this is about this getting someone to think about the fact that this chicken is actually prepared? I mean, so much of us, when we think about quick service restaurants, the food just is there. We don't actually think about the cooking of the chicken. Is that part of the strategy?
Yeah, it's a big part of it. I mean, we don't get credit for the fact that we are hand preparing these meals. And so, it's a source of pride for us. The training experience that we've made it's called the hard way because that's what Colonel Sanders called the process of making Kentucky Fried Chicken. And it means, never cutting corners and taking every step of that process seriously.
And so I had pleasure of doing the experience, and I just want you to know I got an A+. So that puts me right in there. But no doubt I won't be making chicken anytime soon. What is your expectation that these 19,000 cooks are actually going to experience this virtual reality?
We'd like to. Right now, we're working on ways that we can integrate this, and it is a supplement to the current training program that they all will go through. And so we're finding ways, whether it's corporate trainings at the Louisville headquarters or franchisee trainings across the country, that we can bring this experience to our team members and really get them excited and reinforce, the Colonel's way of doing things and the process and the hard way that he invented over 70 years ago.
So how much of this is marketing, like drawing attention to the fact that this chicken is cooked, and how much of this is sort of real training and employee engagement?
I think it's both parts, to be honest with you. There's a definitive purpose we want from a training aspect that really brings attention and pride to this process. But of course, we want to reinforce the fact that we do have, 19,000 cooks across the country making KFC, and And by doing things with virtual reality, we're also hoping that we not only draw in younger customers, but also we attract high potential talent to work in a Kentucky Fried Chicken. And this is a brand that they want to be associated with.
And that's so important to this. And I'm imagining that a lot of your future cooks are, in fact, millennials, and so that must have been part of the thinking in terms of developing a gaming experience or a gamified experience.
Absolutely. The idea of making this gamified, this escape room idea, and the Colonel not letting you out until you've proven that you know his way of making Kentucky Fried Chicken was a big part of that. And we know that our team members and our cooks are the lifeblood of the brand. And so we're extremely proud of the work they do, and we want to make a brand that they're proud to work for.
One of the things that was a revelation to me was that there were 5 steps in the process, and so inspecting the chicken and then cleaning the chicken and flouring it or battering it. So I'm wondering, and it was a fun experience. I'm wondering if you also see this as something that will be consumer facing, and there'll be an opportunity for consumers to share in this experience.
Yeah, so right now, we're really focused on this being an internal training tool. Obviously, we're having some people here in New York today experience it for the first time. Down the road, I think we're open to it being a broader consumer-facing piece, but at least in the short term, we're really focused on this being something our team members can experience.
And what do you think that using virtual reality, one of the things that I talk a lot about on the show is that the medium can be part of the message, that one of the reasons for brands to be looking at virtual reality is that it says that you're tech forward. It says that you're sort of thinking about things a little bit differently or ahead of the curve. Is that an important aspect of the Kentucky Fried Chicken, the KFC brand?
Definitely. We've done, a few things this year in the tech space that we hope, brings a 70-year-old brand to a more relevant place in 2017. And honestly, with technology, our approach is, we never want to go in with the brief that what are we going to do with virtual reality? It's more of what's the business challenge, or what are the thing we're trying to accomplish? And then if the technology makes sense to accomplish that, then that feels like a good fit for us.
And that's really exactly the point, is that the technology is in service of the strategy and not the other way around. So don't go charging at your agency and say, hey, give me a virtual reality experience without a strategic foundation for that. So let's just talk a little bit about the challenges that go into, and must have been new to you, of creating a VR experience.
Yeah, it was a really interesting process. Obviously, the Wieden and Kennedy Lodge team, which is the creative technology design arm of Wieden and Kennedy, was instrumental in this. And then we also collaborated with our food innovation team at KFC, as well as our training team, to really bring all of that together into one place. And so we had the Wieden and Kennedy Lodge team out to Louisville for a few days. They went through the process in our test kitchen. They all made and hand-breaded original recipe chicken themselves. And it really brought a sense of awareness to them of this process and how important it is to us. And so when they went back, they took great care to incorporate that into the game. And so, this has been in development for the last 6 months. And we've basically been doing these development sprints every 3 to 4 weeks, where they go off, make a new part of the game, we come back, we check it, and make sure that it feels authentic and right for the experience that we were trying to deliver.
And had you done any game development in the past?
This was the largest scale type of game experience we've done. We made a Colonel Quest video game a little while back that was online, but nothing on par with this. So this was definitely exploring new territory for us, and thankfully we have great partners at Wieden and Kennedy, as well as our cross-functional team at KFC that was really engaged in the process all the way through.
So as we wrap up this segment of the show, maybe you could provide a couple of lessons learned from this experience. If you had a group of marketers, the CMO club in front of you, and they sort of said, hey, so tell me, give me a couple of do's and don'ts so that I don't make mistakes that might have happened along the line.
Sure. I think the first one is, it's one we already hit on, but it's, have the brand challenge front and center and at the core of everything you do, and don't let technology lead the way. Because I think if you're looking for a way to just do VR for the sake of saying your brand did VR, you're going to end up with a program that isn't very meaningful and doesn't really tie back in a unique way to your brand. I think the other thing is, trusting, partnering with the right group, when you're doing new things and being willing to make mistakes and try new things, but do it in a framework that can make sense. And thankfully the folks at WK Lodge really helped us think through the right way to approach this, a technology project on this scale that we hadn't done before. And they proved to be great partners in delivering what we think is a really fun, high quality product.
So last question for you. How are you going to measure the success of this program, since it's an internal program and not one that you can immediately say this drove sales like an ad campaign?
Yeah, it's definitely a bit unconventional, and with a lot of these newer ideas, there aren't set KPIs or metrics that you're used to with measuring programs. So obviously, we'll be doing things to measure with our internal teams that are using this, team members that are exposed to it, if it changes the perception of the brand, things of that nature. But to be honest, it's something that we're going to be figuring out as we go a little bit, just to see exactly the impact it can have on our whole brand and our whole system.
Awesome. Well, we'll have to have you back on the show after you have some results and can share those learnings. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk to another member of the virtual reality team here at KFC.
Renegade Thinkers Unite is brought to you by Social Media Explorer, the website that explores the world of social media from the inside out. Great advice from today's leading social media columnists and experts at socialmediaexplorer.com. That's socialmediaexplorer.com.
Okay, we're back. And by the way, we are live in New York City doing this podcast. We're at a pretty interesting experience that KFC has put together for the media world to help share and spread the word about this new virtual reality experience that is both gaming and training, and taking a little different twist here. We're actually going to talk to the agency, Wieden & Kennedy's division, which is called Lodge, right? And we're talking to Jonathan Minori, who is the design director behind this KFC project, which is called The Hard Way, a KFC virtual training escape room. So, Jonathan, this is not just sort of the VR in the way that some people think about VR. There's a gaming experience in there too. Talk a little bit about that in specific.
Yeah. So you have a good point. This isn't a 360 video or a linear end-to-end experience. We built kind of a training simulation with a lot of game mechanics to it, just to bring some interest, and we can talk about those. But it really is, it's an immersive, interactive experiences. You can walk around, you're using your hands with the Oculus Touch controllers, and you're basically going through the same steps that a KFC trainee will go through.
So let's go back to the beginning of this exercise and talk about the sort of the key stages to the development of this program.
Yeah, so it all starts with just kind of having a great client like the KFC that allows us to do all this really kind of fun, kind of wacky stuff. I think we realized that they wanted to tell this story of how their chicken is made on site and the process and care and love that goes into it. And when we heard that, we felt like VR was a great medium to kind of merge those two. So that set off, okay, well, what does that look like? What is the experience that you have? And so then we looked at what the brand was doing at that time, and we're doing with that brand, with the kernel and rekernelization. We thought that would be a really interesting character to bring into this. What would the kernel do to train people now with all this modern day technology?
So, and that's, I love that term, kernelization and rekernelization, and it makes a lot of sense. And we talked to George about how just making people think about the fact that this chicken is cooked is probably a fresh thing. So, how do you assess what the kernel would have done?
That's a great question. It got a little weird, as it always does. We knew that the Colonel was really obsessive about his product, his chicken, and the way he did that. So we used that kind of as a jumping off point and saying like, okay, if we follow that line of obsessiveness, where would it go? And we looked out and we thought, okay, well, what other characters were in that vein? And if you look at Willy Wonka, or you look at Ford from Westworld, these are really obsessive characters and maybe a little bit maniacal. And that kind of led us to, well, what if you were in a room, in a kitchen, and you couldn't leave unless you made the chicken the hard way? And that was where the escape room concept kind of came up with. That's where you just did the experience, and it almost felt like everything, you had a little bit of anxiety, everything was kind of there to make sure that you were doing it the right way.
Yeah, and that's funny that, you went to the trouble of naming this and thinking about it as a little scary, a little hard, and that must have been and now that I think about it, a very sort of important part of it, because there is a risk with something like this, is that you kind of simplify it and make it feel like a game, and that it's not this actually hard thing to do to get right.
Definitely. We wanted there to be an element of an authenticity to those steps, and so we wanted to keep that intact. We didn't want to simplify anything just to make the game faster. We wanted to really hone in on what those steps meant, and also add a little bit of a puzzle to it. We're not being super direct about how to do that step. You kind of have to use a little bit of your wits, but also in VR, your natural inkling is to touch everything or try to grab everything. So we played into that with some of the steps, like the opening scene where you have to cut the bag and get started. We kind of leaned into the medium for that.
And so if you're a brand sort of approaching VR for the first time, what are some of the lessons that you would share from this experience and others that you've had when developing a VR program?
Yeah, I think, and we were just talking about this, I think if you approach it, any of these new emerging technologies, whether it's AR, VR, AI, if you approach it from, hey, what should we be doing in this space? We got to be doing something in this space. I think sometimes you don't really create the best experience, or you create something that maybe isn't as impactful or needed. With this one, what we learned is KFC had this really interesting story to tell, and they really wanted to have a story of training their employees in new ways. That just naturally lend itself to a medium, and that medium was VR. And so we were building this upon that story and that truth that we wanted to communicate. And I think that's why this was more successful than some others that just are looking at the medium going, what can we do? We need to be doing something. I think the other thing that brands should be aware of is the type of team makeup and the type of process of what it takes to get something like this off the ground. I mean, I think it's as akin to game development or movie development. You have concept artists, you have designers, 3D modelers, technical artists, and then you have the whole technical component of programming, engineering, testing. It really is a process, and this process took us about 6 months, and that's, in terms of a time scale for games or experiences, that's a pretty condensed timeline. But I think you have to just take into it. It's not a very quick thing, and there's a lot of components to it.
And as you guys are going through this, what are you looking for, and how are you making sure that it's developing the way you want it to develop?
Yeah. So we adopted it's called a sprint methodology. So you hear that a lot in software development. And what it was we took our time frame that we knew we had to hit, and we broke it down into chunks, about 2-week chunks. And in those 2 weeks, we had certain goals that we wanted to hit and see, whether it was laying out the room and getting all of the artwork, or whether it was prototyping a step. For instance, the writing step that you did, we had about 13 different iterations of that. Some really weird that I wish I could show you. But we were doing these in really condensed timelines just to keep track of where we were, rather than a process where, okay, 3 months out, where are we? You don't really have a good frame of reference. So it really was about taking it down into small steps, 2 weeks long, and just constant feedback, not only with our team, but also with the client as well. We had them engaged every step of the way. Every 2 weeks we would show them where they were at, get their input. Cool, let's move on. So they really became partners.
But it must be tricky, because how do you experience VR before the pieces are put together?
Yeah, this was a funny thing that we did. So we did a little bit of theater, right? I'll share a story. Halfway through development, we didn't have a fully realized game yet. with a lot of things you couldn't do. We maybe had 2 steps to it. And we had to get an idea of how long this experience would take or what was the right thing. So we wrote the script. We had all the dialogue. We had all the interactions. We had someone in a headset. They could play part of it. And then we just did theater. I was the director. We had somebody narrate the script. We basically had someone try to play it with real objects. And we got a sense of what the play mechanics would be before we got the game developed.
And were there some things that you just decided had to go down the drain, so to speak? Yeah.
We had this idea at the very beginning that I think we were all, really loving, and that was the first step was just washing your hands, which sounds really weird, but washing your hands in VR just seems really silly, and let's just do that. Why wouldn't we not do that? And we cut that out just for time's sake. The other thing, there were different iterations of the Colonel's hands, the ones that came from the portrait, that had a little bit more of that kind of moment from Ghosts, where they're on the clay pot. Had a little bit of that, and that got a little weird, so we pulled that stuff back.
And then you end up with this this mechanical, sort of computer arm robotics thing, and I thought that was interesting because it gave the Colonel a chance to say, of course, no robot's ever going to make the chicken, but it was there nonetheless.
Yeah. So we started with that. We actually came around to that point after we had developed it and concepted it. So it was going to have more of a role. And that's where, when we worked with our client in that kind of sprint fashion, we learned early on that, hey, you know what, this is really funny and cool. Let's just not have the hands touch the chicken because this. And it was like, oh, great, that's another point we can make. We didn't have that plan. That just came from, let's try something, let's push on this a little bit, and then pull back. And I think we did that in a really nice way.
I think that's such an interesting point, and so often in the creative development process, if it is collaborative and you have the right people in the room, you open up to possibilities. And I just, it's such a great reminder. I can think of so many programs over the years that my agency has developed that started with the concept, but as we iterated, they could get better and better. And part of the goodness of that is that you get a sense that you're on the right track when that happens.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our process was always, what's the fastest we can do to get to some part of the story? So it was writing scripts, it was storyboarding how things would happen, it was sharing that out, and then riffing on it. And it's so much faster to do that with scripts and storyboards, and then in prototypes to some degree, than to take that into kind of full-on development. So that became our exercise all the time was, let's all visualize this so we can all get on the same page, and then let's tweak it and keep going from there. And that's where some really fun things came out of it.
So, how many people did you end up working on this project?
Yeah, so there's probably about a core team of around 8 people, and that fluctuated with the different stages of the project. So I think at most I would say we were probably around 20 people when we were really heavy into producing assets, when we were heavy on still finishing out some of the game script, 3D artists, technical artists, developers. But what we tried to do, every morning we would stand up with the team, the core team, and kind of outline what we were going to do that day. And that kept just the communication really tight. And then those folks who they were working with could kind of give okay, we're doing this today and that, rather than huge teams, huge meetings all the time. It was much more of a kind of a hit squad.
So I was at a screening of a movie. My son happens to work for the Weinstein Company, and he's a young member of the team. And but there was a moment in the film where there was a particular aspect of it that came out that he had an experience with, and I turned to him at that moment, and I imagine there's some element in this thing that there's some moment that you thought, okay, that just killed it for you.
Yeah. I think there's a small moment that I really like, and I think it speaks to the whole experience that we wanted to do in terms of the Colonel's personality. And that's when you finally unlock the door, and the door is having this big moment, and there's all sorts of lights, and it's blinding you, and you're just like, oh my God, I'm finally free. And then it breaks. And it has this really great beat with the music and the audio where it all kind of syncs together, and you hear him oh, this darn contraption, and then it picks up again. And there's a lot of moments, but that moment, I think, kind of seals it for me. And then there's the robot hands, which are just great.
Yeah,
they're awesome. So.
I have to agree with that. The robot hands were fun, and they were very helpful because they helped move the chicken from the breader to the fryer. And I was wondering how I was going to do that. And funny enough, at one point as I was doing this experience, I actually stumbled because I had to reach for the little rubber ducky over there, and I wasn't sure how far I could go out, so I leaned way out. But anyway. Yeah. Yes, I broke your game. Yeah, that would be right. Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. It's really a terrific product, and it's it really opened my eyes, and I've been talking a little bit about this with others. Is that the opportunity for VR is so much bigger than simply the entertainment industry and creating things. I think the B2B applications of this could be enormous. They don't all have to be gamified, but there really are, whether it's from medical training or other things like this. I just see this future being bright. So congrats for you for being in the heart of it.
Oh, thank you. And I agree with all those points and really appreciate it, Drew.
So there you had two perspectives, and I thought it was really important to the episode to hear both from the client and the agency that put it together.
You've been listening to another great interview on Renegade Thinkers Unite with Drew Neisser. But the value doesn't end there. As a listener, you can download a free ebook from Drew, Renegade Thinkers, interviews with 11 trailblazing CMOs any business can learn from. Top marketing thought leaders and proven executives from Time Warner, American Express, and Chico's, and others. Get your free copy at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook. For listeners only at renegadethinkersunite.com/ebook.
So we're back with another part of this episode on virtual reality, and we're going to talk to Chef Bob. And that's kind of cool because we haven't had a chef on the show. What does it mean to be the chef of KFC?
For me, it's an exciting job getting to work on new products for our great fans of our product. We work on everything from new flavors to making our chicken better. Cooking it the right way, doing it the way the Colonel wanted to, which he called the hard way. So it's just a privilege to be a part of it and be a great ambassador to the brand.
And so tell me just a little bit, how long have you been with KFC?
18 years.
18 years. That's a lot of chicken.
Yes, it is. I've seen it all and done it all with chicken, believe me.
And did you start at a restaurant?
Actually, no. I went to culinary school and went through those avenues, working in restaurants, catering, and so forth. The opportunity arose that there was a position open at corporate office, and I started out as what they called back then a culinary technician, and then eventually moved on to our executive chef that we have.
And just for any of my younger listeners, you never know the kinds of opportunities that exist in the world. Culinary technician is not one that someone would have known about necessarily. So here's an important question that I know everybody wants to know. What's the secret recipe?
Obviously, I don't even know that. So being truthful, I don't know that. But of course, we keep it under lock and key in Louisville, Kentucky, at our corporate offices. But it is unique. What we do with that is we have two companies. We'll call it Company A and Company B, and they each have their own blend that they send to an offsite, and a third party actually blends that together. So not one of the companies, they only know their portion of the recipe.
Okay, see, that was news. I didn't know that. That's crazy. So we actually have, it's like we have two vaults with half the recipe, and then the magic must be in the mixing. Now, that's kind of cool, and that is the same recipe that the Colonel used also many years ago?
Absolutely. Nothing has changed as far as his recipe or the way we prepare the chicken. The only thing that's different is we're using larger pieces of equipment to fry the chicken for our audience and our customers.
So one of the things that is interesting about food is that things can impact food that you don't think about. And there's conversations whenever I'm in Florida, the locals complain about the bagels because the water is too soft and it doesn't create the right, doesn't create the right crispness in the bagel. They always feel softer down there. And I'm just curious, does water impact this? Is all flour the same? And what's the degree of variation in something like this?
Well, the variation isn't much different from what we do, whether it's in one restaurant versus another, because it's all in the process that the Colonel created, over 50 years ago. We use the same flour in all of our stores, the same seasoning, obviously, and then of course our special frying process where we use pressure frying to lock in the flavors, and we've adjusted those temperatures in certain ways to create that perfect original recipe product.
Okay. All right. So we have and are you involved in the training of these 19,000 chefs?
No, we actually have a training staff that takes care of all that. I work on new product development for KFC.
Okay. But you're here as part of this virtual reality experience. What was your reaction when you first went through the experience?
Well, I was part of the beta program with Wyden Kennedy's team, as well as our marketing team as well. And we brought them in and we showed them the process of actually cooking our chicken, from start to finish, which takes roughly 25 minutes. So then they kind of hooked me up to a virtual reality system where I used my hand movements and motions to kind of create the process of how we bread our chicken. And then, of course, they built around that and created this fantastic virtual reality program that we use to enhance our training with our cooks.
And I think that's a key word, enhancing the training. I mean, that part of this is getting them excited about the brand and making it fun. But there's another important part of this that I talked a little bit about with George, which is, even though you're the head chef, I never thought about a chef at KFC, and I haven't thought about the cooking of the chicken for a long time. I imagine that even when you tell people you're the head chef, that they don't think about the fact that this is actually prepared chicken.
Absolutely, and we like to refer to Colonel Sanders as the original celebrity chef. So, his process is in place. We've taken that, and all we're doing is manifesting what he taught his cooks to do in his restaurants way back when, and it's doing it the hard way, which means not cutting corners, not rushing through the process, just doing it right and make sure you get consistent product.
And honestly, so I just is cooking chicken that hard?
I think it's one of those things that's very time consuming. I think by the time if you're going to do it at your house, you have to go to the grocery store, buy, various seasonings, you have to buy flour, oil, and it's a messy endeavor. So I think it's one of those processes most people would rather not do at home. So that's why we, as in the Colonel, has perfected the art of frying chicken, and we're very proud of his products.
Well, I have to say that I grill chicken all the time, and it always kills me that no matter what I do, it just takes longer than I want it to. And the one thing about chicken is it has to be cooked. There's no messing around. So, well, Chef Bob, let's as we wrap this thing up, what is it that you want to make sure that America knows about the cooking of KFC?
Well, we get our chicken in from U.S. farms that's inspected by the USDA. It's the same chicken you buy at your local grocery store. We take our fresh chicken, we hand bread it the way the Colonel did. And the thing that we're proud of is that our chicken is hand prepared and hand breaded in all of our 4,200 restaurants by over 19,000 cooks in those restaurants. And it's something that I think our competitors, or at least some of our competitors, don't do. You might see more of a freezer to fryer chicken patty or those things where we hand bread our original recipe chicken, we hand bread our extra crispy chicken, and of course we hand bread our crispy strips as well. So that's something that we're proud of, and to carry that tradition on that the Colonel made so famous.
So I think that's a great place to sort of wrap up this segment. I do want you to know, though, that my father is going to be so excited to listen to this episode. He is a dedicated KFC person, and at least once a week he's in the drive-through in Newport Beach, California. That's actually the stores in Costa Mesa, California. And they know him by name. So thank you very much for being on the show.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Renegade Thinkers Unite is brought to you by Social Media Explorer, the website that explores the world of social media from the inside out. Great advice from today's leading social media columnists and experts at socialmediaexplorer.com. That's socialmediaexplorer.com.
So that was a really different and sort of, as I promised, a special edition of Renegade Thinkers Unite. I think it's interesting that we were able to talk to both the marketer, his agency, and the chef. And again, such a reminder that this VR thing, it's not about the technology per se, it's about the opportunity to express a particular strategy. I think the key insight here from KFC's standpoint is that they recognize that people like me and others forgot the fact this chicken was actually sort of handmade and that this recipe mattered. We all remember the fact that it's a secret recipe and so forth, but we didn't really think about the fact that it was being cooked and prepared and being prepared in a special way. So and what this VR is hot right now, and we might even say that it's finger-licking hot. And I have no doubt that forward-thinking marketers are going to find really interesting uses for that align with their brand strategy. I know I'm getting redundant now, but you will be able to hear a lot more about virtual reality in an upcoming episode just in a few weeks with Abigail Posner, who is part of Google's Zoo, which is a think tank for brands and agencies, and they just did a virtual reality anthropological study. It was fascinating. The results were fascinating. We talked a lot about the difference of storytelling and how it's not necessarily linear. But one of my big takeaways with that episode, and certainly with this one, is part of the excitement to me with VR is thinking about the B2B applications. That's where I really think the opportunity is going to be. Imagine doing VR training for surgeons, wannabe surgeons. Imagine doing VR training. There have been simulators for pilots forever, but this in some ways simplifies that. Abigail also talked about how brands like the New York Times are in some ways reinventing journalism with VR, and how Guinness is bringing a unique beer experience. So there's a lot of excitement in this world, so I have no problem the fact that we've covered it or will be covering it a couple times. But thank you, as always, for listening to Renegade Thinkers Unite. If you enjoyed this episode, this special episode live from New York City, do me a favor and share it with your friends. And until next time, keep those Renegade thinking caps on and strong.
This has been Renegade Thinkers Unite, but it doesn't end there. Just go to renegadethinkersunite.com for more and subscribe to the show. That way, you'll never miss an episode. We'll talk with you next time on Renegade Thinkers Unite.